Yeah, so welcome to the very last session of Blend and Bleed. I'm really glad to kind of come to a close with all of you. And yeah, this is an invitation to conspire. I want to give a quick introduction round to all of you. And yeah, maybe I will just introduce you, and then you can also see if you want to add anything, or also anything you are working on right now you want to share, or maybe also just a question that you want to have answers to, one that can be answered or even one that maybe can't be answered. So Omsk Social Club, hello. Thank you for coming. You are a futuristically political immersive action group, and yeah, Omsk forks traditional methods of live action roleplay, LARP, through immersive installations and real gameplay, RPG, to induce states that could potentially be a fiction or yet unlived reality. And at Blend and Bleed, they have presented Hotel Bardo, which is a workshop that sent us on a trip outdoors using an app, Randonautica, but also the analog technique of myth making and imagination. Do you want to add anything, or tell us maybe where you are at the moment, and maybe any question you have?
It's super nice to see everybody in the room. And I just want to also, before going on, just thank Karina so much for bringing all these thinkers together. And I've really enjoyed a lot of the sessions. I guess like what we are working on at the moment is quite a few things, but one that I think is quite interesting is we did a piece last August where we had like a closed group where we did actually an RGP on LSD and tried to look for the primal roots of technology from virtual and augmented reality. And now this information is being kind of filtered through into notations and documents and exploratory resources that will then aid like a second reading through a Telegram bot or Guardian in order to kind of transpire some of the questions that this role-played world brought up through the protagonist of technology, which is actually a rather like unreliable narrator, but also a kind of guardian of information of the last year and a half under certain circumstances of Corona. And actually, I just was sitting on my balcony reading Bani Brosini's new book, which I'm going to just get because I've forgotten the title. The Fog of Systems, Art as Reorientation and Resistance in a Planetary Scale System Disposed Towards Invisibility. And what kind of came up, and I was thinking about this round circle formation, is that he talks a lot about the stack, like this kind of cosmic stack, and how these worlds are integrated or come through visibility and then recede, and like how do we find the end of those? And I thought that this kind of dynamics were actually had quite a lot of similarities with role play in a way, and like how you kind of terraform a world. And I can hear myself terraforming. And at the end, he speaks about this notion of performing the stack and how artists' strategies might gain access to complexity of these megastructures And I was thinking, like, how do you actually use role play potentially to either like mirror or like cut up this stack or existence, or like, are we performing another stack? Does our stack like sit inside the stack of what's already existing as the stack of the like the global infrastructure? So I'm kind of interested to sort of hear people's ideas of like where these materials actually sit, because I think a lot of the time they're not just like extraction units of entertainment.
Cool. Yeah, we'll just go through you all. So Trakal is a filmmaker, writer, and participatory artist based in Berlin. And through collaborative process, performative rituals, and historical interrogation, and psychodynamic research, he deals with the impact that neoliberal subject production, post-socialist processes, and surveillance technology have on the formation of communities. And at the Blend and Bleed, Trakal gave a world-building writing workshop called Magical Materialism, the World Factory, which took its cues from psychoanalysis and post-socialist perspective of Andrei Platonov's concept of the literature factory. Trakal, thank you for coming. And yeah, if there's anything you want to tell us.
Yeah, I just want to add what's on my mind lately. Also, thank you, Vinicius. I was just at the workshop that you gave, and dreams are also a lot on my mind lately. And I'm very interested in acting dreams, performing dreams, and kind of entering what are the things that we know about storytelling and about relating to each other that are already told through our dreams. And I was just recently reading this book, Theater of the Dream, and it also is about, there's also Salman Resnick wrote this book. He's a psychoanalyst who worked in Italy, and he kind of looks at dreams and in which ways they're theatrical and in which ways they've already influenced theater over the centuries in different ways. Theater makers, but also psychoanalysts who use theatrical metaphor to talk about dreams. And he also has this concept of the fog. That's why I got so excited when you showed this book, Omsk Social Club, because he also speaks of dreams as like a kind of fog reality that's always with us, that transgresses us, and that we kind of, transgress through, and in what ways we are able to sometimes see the fog, and sometimes it clears up, and reality seems very like straightforward and rational, but then it can change. And yeah. Maybe we can, I thought maybe we can talk about like the stratification of the stack and the fog. Maybe there could be some interesting connections there. That's my spiel.
Cool, thank you. So Steven, I'm super happy you're here. Steven is an artist, lecturer, and researcher at Lucas School of Arts, where he teaches meaningful play and art-based research that involves the creation of game and interaction rules within artistic and applied contexts. And in addition to that, he's investigating the relationship between music and visuals in audio media production, and well, a lot more that I won't mention now. And the Blend and Bleed Symposium has been made possible through his guidance and support. So thank you a lot. Yes, really. Yeah, I don't know if you want to add what's on your mind.
Yeah, first of all, I also think I'm very proud or happy that we could host this symposium at Luca. And so, yes, thanks for that. And very happy to be part of this. Thank you also, Vini. We've been working together in the Saluches workshops that you do. So it's constantly been like two parallel trajectories for me, because very often on Saturday there was both a Saluches workshop hosted by Vini, and then a Blend and Bleed workshop hosted by Karina, and it's nice to see both of them blend together today. And oh yes, very happy that in the whole COVID year, all these online workshops, playful experiences have been going on. I'll just shut up.
Yeah, I'll just continue with Vinicius. Yeah, Vinicius, I introduced you before, but just for the people who joined, Vinicius, my cat, just gave us a workshop on Eric Maps in which we were remapping, well, first cutting up dreams, dream narratives, and then rearranging them using Twine. And yeah, Vinicius is a designer, author, researcher, currently based in Mexico City, and he's doing his PhD actually also with me at Luca, yeah, co-Leuven, where and there he researches the remediation of collaborative storytelling workshops into the network and programmable media. So and this, as David mentioned, has been taking shape of different formats, or the Imagina Viral or the Saluches. And yeah, Vinicius, feel free to put also the links into the chat for that, if in case people want to check that out. And yeah, please, I mean, coming fresh out back to yourself after being wearing different masks.
Yeah,
let us
discovering different masks.
Yeah.
And well, like I'm also really happy for all the things that has been happening during the year. So yeah, there's not much to say. That in my case, what I do is to explore the workshop as a format in general terms, not only as a social tool to make the people to come together or to socialize, but also as a tool, as a methodology of research, and also as a aesthetic experience, you know. So I'm trying to take the boundaries of the workshop and what do we call workshop itself, and the different kind of implications that this just has, you know, just to take a remember that workshop, you know, is coming from the medieval times, where it was much more a work space, you know, like the atelier, by instance, where the people were coming here and they was start to work in a kind of single project, but everybody were having different kind of yeah, like how you call it, task. And also think about that those workshops were the places where knowledge were produced and transmit between generations. So it was not only about the productions of objects and sort those kind of things, it was also about the production of knowledge. So from that perspective, you know, I have been like looking into the workshop and what could be the workshop. It also can be much more like a performatic experience. That it was a little bit what I was playing around this time, by instance, that it's much more environmental, theatrical in a way. In a way also we forget that a lot of the education or a lot of the teachers also teaching, sorry, it's happening and it's a performance itself. And so I'm also exploring those kind of places. And my question, you know, for today, by instance, that I would like to share it's much more about the how to come together, you know, or how to create this feeling of together between the different participants of this kind of spaces, that besides that our cultural difference are huge, and also the physical difference, you know, we are now people in Portugal, in Belgium, or here. How can we create this much more an experience that that make us feel together for a really short period of time? So that's much more what I'm curious about it. For sure, also I'm curious about the Trakal, about the dreams, and how dreams also became meaningful in the history of arts and in all the production of knowledge, and we don't even consider them, you know, like as a meaningful thing. You know, we spent 80% of our time there, of our life there, they are cheap, they are free, you know, and they are like amazing experience, and nobody designed it, you know, and we still don't realize this powerful, you know, and meaningful tool, you know, of our life. I still don't know why don't we just consider or give them importance in this in the reality? Why do we focus in this other reality that most of the time is just bullshit? And so whatever. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. All right, I'll go. By the way, if anyone wondered, I'm just going through the alphabet backwards. So next it's Orion.
Hello.
Orion Maxted is a theater and performance maker based in Amsterdam. And with a background in computing, he therefore explores now hybrid performative forms where, well, computers and language systems are made of people. And during his fellowship at IAS, he formed the Interactions Group, which is an art science group that explores the interconnections of art, theater, poetry, and complexity sciences through the lens of algorithmic theater and collective human computation. And at Blend&Bleed, the Interactions Group has performed the Wonder Machine, which is a game basically that generates collective thinking through wonderment. And feel free to add anything, what you're busy with at the moment, what you are wondering about, if you want. I mean, it's just a space.
No, you've pretty much said everything. One thing I'm wondering about at the moment is it's like a really simple thing. It's about variation and selection in collective thinking. Like, what are the I think a lot of creativity comes down to this kind of variation and selection. So I'm like in my thought, I'm sort of narrowing, laser beaming on this one, well, quite a big question. But what are the different mechanisms that we can make variation and selection in human systems, in systems made of people? That's it. That's what I'm going to say.
Okay, I'll dig into that later. Nick, hello, Nick Copenhagen. Happy to have you here. He is an artist from Berlin, and he's interested in the visual properties of abstract systems. And he's currently working on a non-playable card game based on a force-directed graph, a memory dune, and traces of interactions. He's also the founding member, or one of the founding members of the decentralized autonomous Kunstverein. And here at Blend&Bleed, he hosted Accomplices Bleed together with me, which was a LARP based on E.M. Foster's novella from 1909, The Machine Stops, and also atmospheres found in footages that people deposited. And Nick.
Yeah, thank you, Karina. It's really, yeah, I can only like also just add to like thanking you for the whole thing, because I also like really enjoyed it, and I think it was like an amazing combination and selection of like events and people. Yeah, what's on my mind? That's also related to that. I'm lately, or just in general, I think a lot about how to do art online. And I think it took like, and the art world in a way is like extremely offline. And it took like a long time for like interesting and experimental stuff to happen on the internet. And I really see also the whole Blend&Bleed as something that's going now and slowly moving in that direction of having interesting experimental art forms online. And yeah, I often just think about that, why it takes so long, and also a lot about what the direction is, where it's going when like the internet is like truly adopted as like a technology and also changing at the same time. yeah, maybe that's it for now.
All right, then I will finish with Nina. Nina Runa Essendrop is a Danish artist and LARP designer, and educated in theater, dance, and performance studies. She has a strong focus on movement and sensory experiences. And also the meaning of physical action in LARPs. Nina is an active, experienced player in the Nordic LARP community, and she has designed and produced black box LARPs, freeform games, large-scale LARPs, audience-inclusive LARPs, which is also interesting, and LARP festivals. At Blend&Bleed, she hosted a LARP workshop, The Dive, in collaboration with Rosanne van Klaveren. And yes, feel free to add or share your thoughts.
I've vaguely thought a lot about realities, like individual realities and the stuff we share, like when we feel like we live in the same reality and when it's more dispersed. That also seems to fit well in with a lot of stuff already said, and also with the Blend and Bleed, that like a lot of stuff from different places come together and create something new. I think that's it for me now.
Okay, great. Yes. Maybe I want to just get us started with a question. And also, I took notes while you were doing your intros. I feel like there was so many things that I, anyways, was really curious about as well. So I'll try to get back to those as well if they don't come up naturally. But the first thing, I guess, is that I was curious about, because we all work somehow with interactivity and participation of people, and Omsk, I know you also said that once about us basically all being unreliable narrators, maybe in that sense then. And yeah, why tell unfinished stories, and how to find the balance between structure and openness. I think that's something that I'm really interested in, or how do you create structures that enable people to take part, and maybe if you want to share a bit from your own experiences, from your own works, how do you design for that? How do you design for emergent gameplay and or experiences? And
And start if it's like an open question.
yeah, it's totally an open question.
I think it's a very fundamental thing for me, at least, like this balance between what participants are allowed to do and what the frame is that allows us to be in the same reality or play the same kind of fiction. I think from personally, the way I work is a lot about mindset, like letting participants go through different exercises, or like leading them to for a while see the world in a similar way, like it be physical exercises, so they kind of get into the same way of moving or engaging with the space, or it could be like more directing focus into having specific senses that you focus more on, or noticing people in a specific way. I think that's one thing, to kind of get a shared mindset, and then having rules or guidelines that are very specific and very clear, so everybody knows that this is how far I can go in this direction, or like as long as I stay within this frame, it's okay, I'm playing the game right. And then from that point, it's very free. So as long as you stay within the guidelines, you can do more or less what you like to do. I find that's often, if you find the right balance, it's enough to inspire people to create new things, but also give them the freedom to act or understand things in the way that is meaningful for them, rather than me putting something on them that they then have to try to understand. Does that make sense?
Mm.
Can I say something? Can I add?
Yes, just maybe I should just say, like, just do it.
Yeah, okay,
Unless
okay.
you feel like you are breaking off someone else, like just feel like we're around the table and I'm not there.
No, yeah, thank you for phrasing it this way, Nina. I think especially through LARP, I learned a lot about I think so many things in art that we consider when producing art are connected to questions of representation. And I think that's such a crucial thing, that in participatory work, representation is not so, or it happens on a completely different scale, that it's not a question of how should things look like. I mean, that's really so small for me, at least. And in many LARPs that I played, the question of representation, you can like skip it, or they can take on so many forms that doesn't really change so much the experience of the real, of the interaction and of the encounter. And yeah, I only played one of your LARPs, Nina, which was I think in 2017 or something, on Knutepunkt, and it was, it totally made sense to me that the question of sensing and everything that happens internally is the way that we interact and have the encounter, and kind of that's where the relational or something gets formulated. And it's really hard to see from the outside and understand what happens. And I think that it's really hard to wrap your head around. How can you script and contextualize things that are not representable with an art language? I think that's a fundamental problem for me.
I think it would be interesting to hear what Vinny has to say about this, because I think the workshops he does are usually very open, and the downside is that sometimes it's chaotic because he leaves space to unexpected things to happen, and some workshops are just we each bring in a story that we might want to share with others, and then we vote what we find interesting to talk about, and then we end up creating stories about something completely different. It's often like hit and miss. Sometimes it works really well, and sometimes it goes a bit, and you almost have to embrace that kind of risk if you want to embrace the unexpected that might come from it or so. And yeah, I would want to hear how Vinny thinks about it, because I think he's very much on the open-ended side of it. If he has rules, it's always like we only have 1 or 2 rules, and that's it. And I think you like more the open-ended side of it, and I want to hear what you have to say about it.
Yeah, well, I kind of like it, but it's no. I think in general terms, not only like in workshops. I'm thinking also like in general terms in games, like you design the rules, but at the end, like what is happening in reality, you cannot control. And I kind of like that you cannot control. It's much more an invitation or something to provoke an event, or something that you are looking for. I'm thinking, by instance, right now about Orion, like I heard about your workshop about the wonders, or not workshop, the experience about the wonder, and it is just wonder, right? And I will tell you this story because we have like a workshop called Pastiche, where everybody comes with a knowledge to share. And I was asking to the people to bring like a knowledge, and I noticed also that a lot of students or a lot of people that were joining, participants that were joining to the workshop, sometimes they didn't want to share knowledge because they didn't feel able to share a knowledge. You know, I'm not a teacher. How do I dare to share something? You know, and that's something, in fact, that Pastiche is trying to go through. You know, that everybody has something to share and certain kind of knowledge. So during the workshop, we both about those knowledge. So the point is that every time I was asking about to bring knowledge, yeah, some people were not feeling courage to come. But when I ask about a wonder, you know, it completely changed the experience itself. Like, I think like asking for wonders, it was much more asking for a question, and it's an open question, but it's an open question that you can't reply, or you can just place it on the table and ask to the others participants to reply. So in a way, like the wonder, it really works. And as Steven mentioned to me, and Karima as well, you know, the wonder in your workshop is also like, it's a cleat like a flow, you know, or I don't know, and it's just a question in that case, you know, it's just how you place it. So I think at the end, in any kind of participatory or game experiences, is that you might have expectations, but at the end, you cannot control what is going to happen in reality. And that's something that you have, in a way, to embrace. I like to think it's more an invitation to provoke something rather than something that it's going to happen. You know, I understand, of course, that in some cases it's really needed to some things to have it fixed. I don't know if that reply the questions, you know, Steven or Karina, or what do you think in general terms?
I was just provoking you.
I see. Thank you.
Yeah, I could also add on to the back end of this, because like, I mean, I think also with the way that Social Club works is often about thinking about decentralizing the game master or the narrator. It's very much about positioning collaborators, not followers. And I think that that's also not necessarily like one way is better than another way. I think that it very much depends on the user or the player or the participant. Some people really, really want to have a very strict, almost register of what they're going to experience because their personhood really requires that. And that actually can allow them to go a lot further. Whereas other people, I think, really aim for the unexpected, and this can like really create this kaleidoscopic moment across the people who are participating. And one person, of course, regardless of whether it's this more formula or more open, each person will have a completely different experience because everybody is experiencing in very different ways, because we all bring our own histories, our own cultures, our own symbols into them. But what I think is like really kind of the foundation of all these methods, or at least like in the years that we've been practicing, I would say that it's about firstly creating a foundation of embodied communication. Like as soon as that group of people believes that they can trust each other and work with each other and be vulnerable with each other, that's when I think whichever method you will use, people will get the most out of it. Because to be vulnerable to chaos or to methodology is really when the very smallest details can suddenly become like phenomenally striking apparatus for playing. And also I just think too that it's rather interesting when we think about like, what do these methodologies, like what's the reason for creating these methodologies? Because I can speak from Omsk's perspective, is that actually I think we would argue that a lot of reality is kind of controlled, like that there is a very predictable outcomes in reality. That is the way in which oppression occurs, even when it's so blind. It's this very kind of top-down power structure. And I think what these games where you decentralize the ability to tell the tale can also give people the tools to question who has the authority to make reality, who has the authority to be the narrator, who is the person in charge of world crafting. And that can come from them for maybe the first time. Whereas on the other side, if you have like very, very controlled role-playing environments, I think that this also really opens up potentially more kind of like kind of mentally explorative spaces. I mean, I think of like the therapy that is done with role-playing, both in the prison system and outside of, and the ways in which these can actually offer new kind of insights and like cognitive reorganization. So I think that a lot of maybe what we should think about when we decide on our mechanics is like, what are we trying to achieve at the end of the day? Like, what kind of experience do we want to map onto those people's cognitive plasticity, who are our guests, right, at the end of the day?
I think I also have something to add to that. To me, it's I always have to think of like Iranian cinema surrounding this question, because Iranian cinema of the 90s, which is very beautiful in my opinion. Just so many amazing films, and it has a lot to do with like the restrictions they had to deal with, the filmmakers, like really draconian restrictions of what is like allowed to be in a film, in like terms of people and topics and what kind of public spaces you can even use. And then there's suddenly you have like all these rules, all these things that are not allowed, and that disallow a lot of things, and that almost creates a new space then to make something that no one would ever do if you could just do anything. So I think in a way there's also just some things that just don't happen when everything is possible. And so I think it's like a really interesting question.
Nick, could you
Because
give me an example of that?
I think, for example, when you have like strong rules and you can try to break the system and try to play against it and try to find the cracks and try to, okay, how can I outplay this? And sometimes it's just like very trivial and you're just like against the thing. But sometimes you really find like a gem. There's something beautiful there when you try to like circumvent the system.
Yeah, I also think that I appreciate the kind of the structure that you set up, Omsk, and I find it also very complicated that setting boundaries and setting rules is at the one hand creating a type of power structure, but at the other hand creates also opportunities of care, and also, as you said, Nick, like the possibility to critique power structures, the possibility to bend boundaries, the possibility to like transgress and act out and all these things. And I feel when there's no boundaries and no game master, then other things like unconscious things come into a group. Personalities, already like power structures that are in our society that emerge. And then it's the question, who finances pieces? What are the platforms on which pieces happen? Who invites who? I think then so many other power structures happen like below the surface that we have to deal with before we can start playing, or that then become part of play but are not, you know, cannot be addressed as easily, or need extra space and extra care to then address, and who leads these. I just think, yeah, chaos always comes with this extra amount of tending for it, in my opinion, that I find very intriguing and always very like intense somehow to deal with. But yeah, that's a really interesting question.
Yeah, I'm also, for instance, thinking in the case of Ulises Carrión, you know, like he has like a couple of performance, you know, where he was basically like placing or like following the rules, but building reality in a way, and that was his work. Yeah, like just to mention one love story, you know, where it was happening in Arnhem in Holland, where he was like evolving, and a story about Rome or Juliet. And there is another, by instance, called he was like provoking or inviting the people to steal a diamond, that at the end it happened, by the way. And or by instance, like to bring like a yeah, to bring I don't remember right now her name. He was bringing a superstar to the Netherlands, but he basically create this idea that she was super famous here, and she was not. I mean, she was, but it was much more in the past, you know. So in a way, like when they interviewed to Carrión, he was saying that the author was all the time behind, you know, like that people were going from event to event, and they were thinking that the author was this woman, you know, this artist, Lydia Prado. Yeah, so sorry. But it was not about her. It was much more about all the time how he was like evolving the diverse events, how he was organizing the events. So in a way, it's really interesting to see how rules, you know, are shaping or shape, as you mentioned, Omsk, that plays reality, you know, like face how we deal with reality, face everything, or face like the structures itself of reality. So, but at the end also there is a moment that is completely chaos, you know, that is besides that, you know, that this might happen, maybe it doesn't happen, and that's the beauty in a way, you know, that there is a, you cannot completely, or I am the one, by instance, that think that you cannot completely be sure that something is going to happen in the future. You can attempt, you can try to grasp that this is going to happen, and yeah, and in my case, that's when I found beauty itself, that something beautiful is happening, you know, when it's like spontaneous, coming from somewhere, you know, event. So I don't know. In my case, I think that that to find the right balance between both, you know, to find like a one or two simple rules that can provoke certain kind of mechanics, I think, yeah, it's enough.
Can you say the name of the artist again? Sorry, I missed the name.
Yeah, sorry, Ulises Carrión. He was a Mexican conceptual artist in the 70s who was based in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam. And he wrote, like, for instance, the new art of making books. He's famous for that books that is giving like theory for artist books. But he was also doing like different kind of performance. And in a way, the interesting part of Ulises is that his origin is from literature. He was a writer in Mexico, but in the Netherlands, he became a visual artist in a way, or more closer to the visual artist. He was kind of like a mutant. So I think in a way you can find traces that he was a writer, because he was all the time trying to bring the stories alive, to make the storytelling happen in a way, you know, to place in those rules or those events. Yeah, to organize it. I don't know if that's the correct word.
Yeah, that's
Maybe
actually...
write his name in the chat. But
Yeah. Ah, yeah.
Yeah, for
Thanks.
sure.
Yeah, just the last thing you said, like making stories alive. That is actually something else I would like to speak about. But I just want to say, like, I think it's what just came up within this, that that in a way rules sometimes, like, there's already so many rules there, or even maybe that some people speak up more than others, or so then that these kind of structures can sort of like imposing other structures can help undoing others. That's what I a bit also read from some of the comments, and I think that's really interesting. Also in terms of, especially because the endeavor in some of your works is to come more to a collective thought, or to a way of thinking together. I don't know. Also, Orion, you have not said anything to the topic. I would be still curious to have your little input, and then maybe we can move on to something.
Yeah, sorry, 1 second, I have to get the door.
Yes. Perfect timing. Mm.
Hi, sorry. Yeah, I don't know. What was I thinking when we were talking? Yeah, it's all really interesting. I mean, the last few years, one of the reasons I started the interactions group was because I've been doing research into science, into complex systems. So we started this group also as a collaboration between artists and scientists to understand, in a way, partly it's for me to understand participation, or what we're sometimes calling decentralized thinking, or distributed thinking from kind of scientific viewpoint, because there's a lot of scientific research in like self-organizing systems, and how, effectively that's how nature organizes it. At least if you don't believe in God, right? Like everything makes itself. There's no central control, or there's no central node doing everything. So it's kind of, there's lots of research going on in science and self-organizing systems about how this functions, right? But also how that applies to societies, and how you can, and then you can sort of think, I'm trying to think that through then into performance and participation. So how to make a performance in a sense that makes itself, right? Like how to make a performance that organizes itself, and what are some of the mechanisms to do that, and what are some, what rules, what kinds of rules, how do you combine rules? So that's where my research has been. And I find it interesting, maybe in another way of saying some of the things. It's also good because somebody also mentioned that, in society, these top-down forms of control are kind of the norm for like organizing society. But it's very, I wonder if that's true in a certain sense. Like, I think that in nature, it's distributed systems, kind of, circulatory, bottom up, top down, distributed systems are the norm. And I wonder to what extent even power structures, they tend to bootstrap onto distributed systems. So in a sense, society is kind of self-organizing, but if you want to get into power, you find a way of tweaking that self-organization so that it does the thing that you want it to do. So that's what advertising does, for example, is it plays on people's fears, or people's desires, or, but those desires, those fears, they're already there, right? Like the economic system, capitalism, that's like, it's already there. But some people are able to position themselves and to control or steer a system. They sort of set up a system, or find an existing system, and then find ways to intervene in it and steer it more in the direction that they're interested to go, and then surf those dynamics in the direction that they want to go. So that's I think that's really interesting, that kind of distinction between what's a really a top-down system, and what's a kind of really like a, let's call it organic, self-organizing system that's being kind of bootstrapped or surfed in a particular direction, you know.
So would you then say that like the small rules are then like the draconian rules, the very strict ones? Like the simple mechanics, are they the most strict then?
I'm not sure what you mean, sorry.
I was just, so it sounds a bit like you describe it as like you have like this emergent process first, and I'm also now connecting it to like maybe your piece, the Wonder Machine, where you have like one rule.
Yeah. And
was thinking, so it's maybe the simple rule, the one that's already like very strict, and it's not so much then something that's at the that goes up, if you even use that metaphor, and is then like exercising control from the top.
Yeah.
In a way, I'm also just trying to understand what you just said.
Yeah, I mean in the Wonder Machine, there's like one or two rules, right? But it's like, but yeah, exactly. I mean, it sounds, you know, it necessitates having human beings who are able to speak and talk and understand and remember. And there are all these rules, all these processes are kind of just, you know, taken for granted, that are all going on in the background, right? It's kind of a banal example. But I think that we're such an example, like as human beings. I think that, you know, our consciousness is a little bit, or our free will, our agency is like, it's not that we don't have agency, but we're not controlling everything, right? Like we talk about ourselves as if we're controlling everything, but we're not really, right? Like I don't control all the processes in my body. I don't control my blood pressure or what each of my cells are doing. There's lots of things I don't control. I don't control what I forget, for example, or what I remember. So, you know, we are also these kind of self-organizing systems. But we talk about ourselves as if it was a kind of top-down thing, you know, where I'm organizing things, organizing things. And maybe that's why, maybe one of the reasons we kind of reapply that structure onto society and like onto religion, that we have this idea that there's a kind of centralized controller.
But I wonder if maybe was I cutting you off, Omsk? Sorry, you were also starting in the same moment. Go ahead.
Is yours a long one or a short one? Mine is short.
Okay, go ahead. I don't know how long mine is.
I mean, I find this, I'm trying to like Rubik's Cube rhyme what you just said. And I'm just wondering about history in this dimension, because not everybody comes into the system on the same level, right? Not everybody in this Zoom is even coming in on the same level, even though we are all here on the same level, because there is predisposed narratives that we have no control over. But still, I mean, for just very simply, we are doing this Zoom in English. That means it's going to be a hindrance to others. And I'm just wondering how this kind of history that is already demarcated before we enter this either self-organizing or uncontrollable nature kind of comes into it. Trakal, do you want to add on, or?
Yeah, I think my comment goes in the same direction, actually. And maybe it goes back to the question of representation within participatory art, because I think the question why we come up with rules and try to find ways of encounter that are scripted, that have game masters, is because our societies are culturally produced by rules, and we live in, you know, rules kind of transgress us, laws transgress us, the way that we relate to each other are already immersed in power structures. And I find that the question of participation, of course, is fundamentally connected to the question of democracy, of how do, you know, political systems emerge? How do people connect to each other through, I don't know, assigned ideas of what can equality mean, or blah, blah, blah. And this is not to defend democracy. I'm just trying to think that the idea of participation has as an artistic form, has like a concrete background, and our ways of, yeah, creating rules and boundaries for these encounters, I think, deal with that, because that is a reality in society. And if you decide to get rid of rules, get rid of a game master and say, this is an open forum, you know, here's a group of people, go figure it out, then that will still play a role. Like the rules will still, the laws will still have transgressed us in that moment, and it will still come out in some way. I just think that is really the context. And I don't really believe that we are these, I mean, that's not what you said, Orion, sorry, but I think the self-organization aspect is one, but it can only exist, you know, in the context of rules and laws that transgress us.
But the I think this, I mean, yeah, I mean, when scientists study in science, when you study self-organizing systems, they talk about them in terms of rules. So it's not that a natural system doesn't have rules, or it has just as many rules as a society. It's just that those rules have emerged. They haven't been placed there in a top-down way, which is, you know, that's also the sort of the impossibility of organizing self-organization, is that you have to kind of put it there in some sense, right? You have to impose the rules. You have to impose the game rules on people to get them to play. But no, the idea that nature doesn't have rules and society does is I think is wrong. It's misplaced. It's the wrong. I don't think that's the right way to think about it. They're just different kinds of rules, and well, actually they're not different. Oftentimes they're not different kinds. They're the same kinds of rules. So that I think it's a false way of thinking about the difference. Yeah. So, you know, yeah.
I was just wondering if, because I had to think of actually religious scholar James Cars, who talks about infinite and finite games, and well, he just says that the ultimate infinite game is nature, but then like finite games are where clear rules are defined, and an ending also. So I found this kind of I wonder if this distinction also is somehow helpful in this regard. I don't know, is it clear? The basically infinite games can also be happening in society. I mean, nature is maybe the biggest one, but families or institutions, religions, subcultures, they're also just in general social realities are infinite games, according to his idea.
I like the idea also, like in a way that it's a game. But I'm also thinking, I mean, just with the saying about self-organization, like I have lived I stay in Europe and in the Netherlands, for instance, for 4 years and 5 years, and I was living in a really small town, you know, and I was really surprised how people were following the rules. And you have to think also that in case of Mexico, like self-organization, it's how the country runs. You know, it runs not because there is a leader or there is somebody. It runs because the people organize in a way. I don't know. It just happened kind of spontaneous. It's just like, but also it can be. It happened in a moment. It can be even aggressive sometimes. You know, it can be like really going back to the most naive way of organization. You know, but it happened because of the same society, and it just happened in a quick moment. You know, we forget also a little bit that, like, we think about the organization in terms that it's an absolute term and it's already fixed, you know, but we don't think also that this is flexible and this is moving those dynamics quickly, especially like in the case of reality or in the outside world. So you might find like an event, and that event might trigger diverse kind of things that where the people start to organize. And in some cases, the most natural way or the most naive way of organization will start to happen, you know, and this will only take a few minutes. And in that moment, they will forget that it exists a president, that it exists the police, that it exists everybody else. So it's also interesting to think about it like that it's not also something fixed, that is flexible, that is moving. And I guess that's also what happened in a lot of our job, you know, when we are organizing something. So it's happening by a small event, you know, and in a really specific context as well, you know, but then it's gone. Yeah.
I like to think of that as like social evolution. And I think that also I like to think about role-playing as social evolution. Sort of in this setting, how many gamers say, if we played out all the problems in the world and we could keep pressing restart, we might have a better chance of solving them without such disruption. And I think that to kind of remove this survivalist evolution and instead going for a much more social, translinguistic one is really potentially also thinking about Trakal. I know that you mentioned this role playing, like not translating into artistic material. But I actually think that in a way, that change or that shift or that knowledge or experience is the artistic material in that way. And that's like what we take out, you know, the same way you like can't take out the painting out of the gallery. You can only take out like your bodily experience, and then you like, I might tell Karina about this painting that I saw, and then like that's really the cogs, and Karina might go to see X or look up and see later. And I think these are all parts of this kind of social evolution, and maybe we cannot track that so easily or map it so easily in the arts. And I think obviously quite often we don't think about arts in like revolutionary terms, because maybe they're like long game, you know, maybe by the time they walked at the gallery, like they don't even represent the art that they started with any longer. And so it's really difficult for us to see or realize like where these works manifested. But I think it's kind of exciting, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a good move to like another topic, in the sense that, or not another topic, we've talked about it already a lot, but this idea of, well, world building, but also or worlding, and how we use it, how also we use I guess fiction in to help us think through either futures, but also other ways how things could be organized. So yeah, I mean, games can to some extent maybe make us more understanding of how certain systems work, but also I really like your I think actually multiple people said it today, that it is more an embodied experience. So it's maybe not just also just looking from on top, how does it work but being all of a sudden in a finding yourself in a situation where you have another way of interacting, another way of relating to something, so creating new relations too, but all that in a in an imaginary, partially imaginary space. And so yeah, I would like to hear a bit more about, or like talk with you more about this relationship between the imaginary and the consensual reality that we don't really agree on. I guess it also relates a bit to the idea of bleed. But yeah, I don't know if you want to talk a bit about that, what that means in your practice. Or Steph, you had a question?
I don't have a question, I just had a point, and I apologize for my fan noise. It's just that my computer is hyperventilating and I have no way of fixing it. But I wanted to bring in this question of bleed, also actually like linking back to what you were all speaking about, that thing that games help to explore is also the way in which contradiction can be sort of untangled or also felt in a very embodied way in game settings. And I say that because like contradiction is like all around us. It's like that there's no like central planning without decentralized planning. There's no emerging systems without like sort of like planned systems. And I think that's also something like going back to this idea that there's a system and we can only tweak it. That is also sometimes maybe something that a game can be used for to break apart. Because in the end, if we say that there's an emerging system of capitalism and it just exists, then it kind of also feeds into this narrative that there is no alternative. Whereas we know through like historical thinkers that yes, there are alternatives, and this was not a natural progression or like a natural development of human societies. And I think also that there's this contradiction and are not nature. I think I'm cutting out as well, but that there's this contradiction that humans are nature and not nature at the same time. And that is something that can also be explored within game settings. And I think that's also something that's extremely important also for how I've sort of seen playing in, or what I've taken away from playing in role-playing games, because that's something that like carries over from like how you previously sort of like analyze your environment, how that translates into how you build an environment together in this world that you share in a game, and then how that can then again through playing be carried over into your everyday life. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Steph. I think that's, contradiction is such an important aspect also when thinking about world building, I find. I mean, I think to think that world building comes from like a tradition of utopic writing and like utopic political projects, that maybe the problem of which is that they always try to solve the contradiction, but that maybe when we write worlds or construct worlds together, that could be a way of pushing a contradiction, or, you know, maybe artificially solving a contradiction in order to then, you know, another one could turn up or could pop out. And yeah, I wonder if there if that also is something that happens always parallel, that if you collectively construct a world, that the contradictions that the people bring in stands opposed to the utopic fiction, for example, as is always done by one person, or that's kind of the problem, perhaps, that all these utopic projects were always constructed in this sort of authoritarian way of what is utopia, which of the contradictions is solved. And I think that is, yeah, that's like such a crucial question, how to make the contradictions survive, or like how can they be brought into the world that we construct.
I mean, some of this comes back to realities. Oh, sorry. And like this having an idea about a shared reality, or that we each have our own angle or our own experience of a reality. Something about like using language, or using rules, or using systems for explaining what reality is, gives this idea that it is shared, and it's actually a lot more nuanced and complex than that. I think like with contradiction, for example, that they can easily be there because of the way we formulate it, or like we place it in our brains. We get to see it as contradictions. And I think some of what LARP can do is definitely working with contradiction, but also in creating different ways of thinking about the world or experiencing the world, like again noticing and valuing different aspects of our moment-to-moment experience of what reality is. Oh, I don't know if this makes any sense.
No, I think it makes a lot of sense. I was just thinking that what it also trains your brain to do, I think, is the kind of layering, that you are in different realities at the same time, so to say, where you kind of have to deal with, yeah, being someone and then your mother calls and or something. I mean, yeah, and I think that's what I'm really interested in, is also how much does it just really is a kind of almost yoga for like a flexibility training for our imagination, or for our understanding then also of how worlds are created and how stretchable they are. And then maybe I feel like this also is something that is happening, that we are more, we create a desire or an appetite for experiencing a variety of worlds, and to understand they can happen at the same time, and to know that this is okay, or to not freak out.
Yeah, in terms of yoga, it's also, I think it's a really good exercise to, you know, to be part of a system, right? So because we're always living in that situation where we have a little bit of agency, but we often view the world as if it was somehow kind of outside of ourselves, that we were kind of observing it, you know, apart from us, rather than thinking of ourselves as being really part of these systems, and figuring out how do you have agency in this system that's made of lots of different people and lots of different parts. Like, I think that's a sort of fundamental thing for us to try to also get our heads around. It's interesting working. I mean, it's been an interesting process also working with scientists and thinking with them about the relationship between modeling. So modeling in the sense of building like a computer model of a given system, and then trying to build models of systems with people. so that indeed it becomes a kind of a computer model, but you're inside the model, like you're a part of the model. And then this performance or this game is somehow like explaining something or demonstrating certain kinds of mechanics or systems, but you're inside it. You get to feel how it is from the inside. So that's that kind of notion of embodiment again.
I find it interesting how we start talking about game rules and how to design them, and how within half an hour or maybe less, we start talking about how nature works, how society works, spiritualism, yoga now even. Like, is it because we are game designers that we like see too much in it, or is it just the essence of designing games that you're actually doing something artistic, let's say, on such a fundamental level that all the questions of the world are part of it? Or is it just us? I don't know.
I don't know. It's a good question. I know. My part of me thinks it really is that fundamental, right? Like if you there's only certain number of kind of building blocks for building systems, you know, like using rules and so on, and all these different things you can get out of it. So it's like once you sort of crack that code about how, or codes about how systems work, then but on the other hand, it could just be that once you have a hammer in your hand, everything looks like a nail. You know, like we as human beings, we're just really good at thinking of rules, you know. But maybe there's lots of other ways of thinking about the world that we're just not very good at.
In my experience as like designing, there's like two different ways of going with some of this. Like one is the creating rules or creating systems, like something that is verbally agreed on, at least like an understanding that this is how the situation or this fiction or this whatever limited thing we are in together. And yeah, exactly, this then learning each how to navigate the system in a meaningful way, where you take in others' experience as well as being able to apply your own. The other tactic is sensitivity, that is much more demanding. Like then it's about a bit like Omsk talked about, like creating this physical trust in one another, and like starting to experience signs or like signals from each other that will allow you to navigate a space together in a way that's including everybody and both make room for the individual and kind of where the group wants to go. I think it can often be a combination of these two, but like the more sensitive version is like for me, the more embodied or the more intuitive way of doing it. And again, it's a lot harder because we have a lot less language and a lot less tools, at least I have, to go into this mindset. And also working with participants, these things take so much longer to communicate because it's not something we learn from an early age in the same way as how systems or rules or verbal agreements function.
And how was this now for you to work online, or like, because yeah, especially like, I mean, I think you work a lot with the body, or like that's a very crucial part of your. How was the experience to do that online now?
Super difficult in the beginning. Yeah, exactly, because there's so many things you can't pick up on, so many tools. I think a lot of it though can be solved, and voices and also even small images. Once you learn to read this more, some of the sensitivity can still come in there, but it feels like starting all over, like having to relearn or learn new tools in order to achieve something that's just approximately the same result.
Yeah, I mean, I guess also this in a way goes to all of you. I mean, for you all, some of you have worked online before. This had also been a question of you, Nick. I remember. How have you experienced it within? Yeah, of course, this symposium, but like more actually just in general now, the works you have been doing. I know, Orion, you have moved your interactions group online. I know, Omsk, you were very, actually, you created a work, Unrealism, that dealt really with the identities online and the atomization of them. I just wonder what you think about it as a space to create community, but yeah, also in the sense that there seems to be overlaps with the imaginary in weird ways, like they seem to be closer connected somehow, because they are not directly embodied, but because they are something we have to sort of believe in, or we have to and since a lot of us, I think, work with imagination also as a tool, we need to believe in the world, otherwise it doesn't do anything for us. We need to believe in the world so it can protect us from reality. So yeah, how does the virtual play in for you? And also, I mean, is this even a helpful distinction to go like virtual, physical? Maybe not.
I was just thinking that actually. I mean, as somebody who kind of thinks that there is not really like a difference, or at least I think that there's like a quite effective lead on between digital life and IRL. I think that so much of whether one is working online or whether one is consuming online often bleeds out into, let's say, this physical world rather than a digital world. So I think actually, as much as with any place where you create a work, you have to kind of work with the architecture that is offered to you. So whether that's like a huge hall or a bus stop or a Zoom room. And I think maybe just also tying into maybe these tools that were presented through participation of role-playing environments is that like one's mind becomes like rather flexible and fluid and can kind of begin to maybe adapt quicker. And I think like within Omsk anyway, like, I mean, also just working with so many fluid and exceptional people that like, I think for us, like we never really had like too much problem with it, because there was always like ways in which we could utilize the digital in order to like manifest or propose like an alternative narrative line, or like different levels of estrangement, or like, for example, running this piece, which we actually ran for like 58 days solidly, which might have actually been more difficult if we weren't online, in a sense, because also for something just like very simply as like budgeting a 58-day production, which had 360 participants actively working within it, is just kind of like obscene in a way. So actually these things can really be, or at least for our budgets, it's kind of a big ask. Like, and so I don't know, I think that maybe, of course, you lose things, because of course we are very nostalgic as humans, or non-humans, or superhumans, whatever you want to say. Of course, like the physical is lost, and there is a trauma of that, and it's harder to get closer to each other. And I definitely wouldn't advocate for a complete shift to digitality, but I think maybe also exploring these contradictions that was spoke of earlier, like one also begins to understand like what can be examined within the digital and what cannot, and what can be examined within the physical and what cannot. Like I am very kind of, as you can probably say by the answers, I'm like very against like one rule, kind of one idea, one is better than the other. I don't really like to try to think in these binary dimensions. But I think that all these things are like scripts, and it's like really about like how we can find a place within them, and what's interesting to like coax out, and what phenomena can be found in these spaces. Maybe also being like an eternal optimist helps.
Yeah, I think also that we're still kind of recognizing our bodies in those spaces, like even how we interact in front of the camera, you know, like we just stay in front of the computer, and because somebody placed the camera there, we just, is the way that we usually work, but we don't stand up. We often don't walk with the computer, like, well, here we have to be, that has the camera in the side, and she's showing herself like this, you know. So in general terms, like we haven't really understand itself, our body and this medium itself. I know, by instance, that there are some examples and some workshops or experience much more as a walkable experience in the phone, you know, where they are walking. And I think all those kind of interactions, they really became much more meaningful. What I think it's yeah, missing sometimes is much more how do we behave here and how do we behave in public, I mean in the same room, you know, like if we were in the same room, maybe I wouldn't be smoking or yes, you know. So those kind of like small details, like in how we do interact, you know, or even the hands, you know, because most of the times we are always here, you know, so we cannot, I mean, for Italians and for also people from Latin cultures, to show the hands, it's quite important, you know. It's also part of the message of the communication. So I think we are kind of like missing, you know, those small details of communications, and we are still kind of adapting in a natural way, you know, to all those, to the camera itself. I have seen, by instance, my nephew, who is 3 years old, how he behaves in front of the camera and how he tried to reply to the camera, you know, to talk to the other, and he tried to pass through, you know. He still doesn't understand that you cannot pass through, you know. He was throwing like a ball, you know, trying to pass through to the other side, because in the other side he was talking with his uncle. So all these kind of things, you know, yeah, I guess most of the people that are in this room, we are still coming also from the TV, So the way how we interact with the camera and stuff like that, it's completely different our bodies. So from that perspective, I think there is like an entire field of exploration, especially for performatic arts, for instance, for theater. Like I still cannot understand a lot. Like in this case, they are not only actors, they also became like the how you call it, the camera, right? So they have to think that there is a camera and how they are gonna be moving, you know. So all those kind of things, I think it's interesting to see like the different proposals that might happen on the oncoming years, not only in this kind of socialist space, you know, this virtual room, but also in some other technologies. And so I'm really curious if somebody of you also have like experience or deployed your experience or workshops in some other, using some other technologies.
I mean, I don't know if someone wants to answer. I was just thinking that like, or yeah, that I share this idea that there's still a lot to explore also in terms of not forgetting the bodies in these kind of encounters, especially, I mean, and that's then more what I'm trying to wrap my head around is like, because in one way we are more connected, in one way now it gives us the possibility to speak to people that are yeah, far away, we could not normally not speak to. On the other hand, it's obviously really also immediately the moment you use technology, you exclude others that cannot take part, and it's a kind of this negotiation, but then also that just technology comes with its own structure. And I mean, it's not innocent, it's not objective, it's not immaterial either. There is server farm somewhere and there are data sucking, and we know all that, and it's like this kind of whole structure around any technology really is for me always somehow there. And I mean, of course you could say if I'm walking on the street, someone has built that street. So if I'm working on the street as an artist, does it mean now I have to also think about Strabag or whoever has built this? Should I now, like, in that sense? But then with the, yeah, of course, with, I mean, we're working in Zoom right now, like, hi, by the way, maybe that's our way. No, but like, this is, yeah, just, I wonder also how you navigate with that, or is that relevant? And then at the same time, yeah, I totally agree that the spaces are totally connected also. I mean, if you think of, I don't know, drone operators, or also like, I don't know, cyberbullying or something, it has like, whatever happens online, it has very, very, yeah, physical consequences on people. And still it offers, it stretches into the imaginary space also, I think, more, or we can be anonymous, we can hide, we can create alter egos, virtual egos, and that seems to in some ways be quite interesting for people who do anyways already work with world building or with role play. And yeah,
I think we cannot forget that all of these are private spaces that we interact now, like private spaces that are open to us, that might be free for us, you know, on the front end. But the idea that our practices can happen in public space, in some sort of space that is not privatized, it's not connected to capitalist structures. This is just so hard online, or it's just made so much harder. And I mean, of course, we can decide to use other technologies, but there's a question how, yeah, to get participants there. I don't know. I think this participation in capitalist infrastructure becomes so much more.
Yeah, well, with all technologies, also mean like, I mean, we are using basically like Zoom, but it could be also VR, you know, like I have not really create like a workshop there, but of course I would love. Or even like a chat room on Facebook. Like, I mean, we use Zoom because basically that's what everybody's kind of using, you know, like we need to have like this visual representation. So, but technologies using internet, there are a lot of kind of platforms. So I think it's interesting also to see these ways that we can become social or like come together to try to work a game or try to do a game or try to create a how you call it, because all of them at the end also implies its own rules, right? Its own way to behave. Like it's like just in the case of Zoom, like the computer most of the time has the front camera, so we behave in this way. We don't have like I go back again to be, you know, we don't have this face, you know, that is completely different. It changed a lot, or we don't move like forwards and backwards. So I don't know. I think that I understand that technology implies like accessibility to different kind of people, but also like I think at this point there are already a lot of kind of technologies in how we can play diversify our games in a way, our experience. Like
I totally follow what you're saying, but I also have to wonder, like, if I was sitting with you all right now, I don't think I would also be walking around the room or like snacking, or I don't know. Like, I mean, I do totally get it, but then at the same time, I'm like, but I really want to, I'm looking at, I have this gallery view set up. I see all your faces, you know, I'm trying to gain contact with you, like by facing forward. You know, I'm like, this is like me engaged, but this would be like the same way I would be also engaged if I was in a physical space too. And I think that there is like a lot of ways, like within a workshop format. I mean, I can definitely say within the workshops that Omsk does, we don't sit like this. And I would love to see everybody's hands. I think that we should have definitely wider lenses, that's for sure. As someone who's also very expressive and can only see my own hands, but I do, thank you, Steven. Yeah, maybe we should all just do hands. But I just wonder whether, you know, I think that there is, of course, sometimes I feel like it's too easy to blame technology. Here I am on Go Technology team, I don't know. But I just think that sometimes there is maybe one's presumption of unwritten rules actually are not there. Or they're there for like another reason, which is also kind of interesting, like looping back into like this nature, supernature, organized plateau of how we interact with each other. Because nothing would happen really if one of us did decide that we actually wanted to lay down, right? And just listen and speak. I mean, that wouldn't offend me. So I just like, I feel like maybe it's us, you know, we're so dependent on this like very top down, like status. I think about a bit like we're sort of sitting in this like cybernetics like moment, but actually we are the ones feeding it. Like we're enacting, we are role playing what we think should happen in this situation.
But I think the first thing that I think about is that the things that we see are still invisible to us, because the very important aspect of interaction is gaze. But you have no idea who am I looking at. I'm always looking at the group. And I don't know when you are looking at me, so we don't even have like personal interactions through our gazes, although I can see all of your gazes. But I think it's such a different way of how we interact with groups. It's so reduced.
We say like and and we all these kind of non-verbal things that we do to agree with each other or disagree. We don't do these as much on Zoom. I think I'm probably speaking like a couple of seconds before you hear me as well. So we're all like temporarily apart. Like we're also like we're permanently like 2 seconds distance from each other, you know? So it's like it's anything that requires any kind of precision of timing is impossible.
Yeah, my experience of leading the magical materialism workshop, which I originally designed for not online, and then I tried to redesign it for online, was that everything is much slower. Like I need to do everything like piece by piece, give people much more time to figure out how to interact with technology, how to interact with each other in a breakout room. It's just everything has a kind of, like a time warp. What is it called? Like, yeah, it's just a slower time. Like a lag, yeah, exactly. And I think there is something interesting in this aspect of reduction. And I think that many artists in performance have tried to do that in the real world, just thinking about reduction and what does that do. And technology sort of forces us to work with these reductions, but it could also be that this is just our moment in time and that technology is not up to the task yet and that we are sort of lagging our own historic moment, you know. That could also be an aspect.
We're almost at the end of time. I would just like to still give this possibility now really to the audience to maybe, there's actually just something that came in. I have noticed that a lack of requirement to have interactive gaze might make the virtual environment more accessible, equal for those who might not usually like that gaze in the first place. Yeah, that's a really good point. Thanks, Dee. Yeah, and yeah, just really if there's any questions at this point still, or anything else you want to bring up, also, yeah, within the group, but also really to the audience. This is still a good moment.
I wanted to maybe add in on this, like, sort of conundrum with technology that in a way we're always struggling against our conditions of existence. And for example, also, I guess, language is also a technology, and LSD, as Omsk also explored in the Utopias piece, is also a technology, and it is always conditioned by certain variables and forces outside of our own agency. But in the end, these everyday practices of struggling against them turns this into a kind of collective struggle as well, and a sort of like joyful militancy against those. And I kind of feel I see all of that in a lot of your practices as well, and kind of also feel that this energy is also something that will bring people together, like regardless of the sort of like extreme disciplining of technology that there is. Because I think, like, for example, neutrality is not the right framing to think about technology, because that would mean that it's indifferent, and that's also something that Yokoi always talks about, that is like deeply problematic. But in the end, like, technologies are extremely disciplined because they have to, electrons have to be, it has to like work in a certain way, packets have to be switched in a very precise way, otherwise it would not work. But within that precision, there's also a kind of imprecision and a way of like struggling against all this disciplining and the sort of like also industrial military complex that comes with it. And playing in the end is a way of finding agency within those parameters.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good point, because like also when I think about the application of technology, I also think a lot about, and I think this is also triggered by Dee's point as well, is that a lot of technology has allowed disenfranchised bodies to really come to fruition of like how they want to be represented or what they want to explore, or how they can come together in a safe space. Like, as much as we of course know a lot about unsafe spaces online, but I think that there is also, as much as there is ultimate extraction economies that are occurring, like specifically through this platform, let's say, of Zoom, but there is also extreme opaque infrastructures that are in place for groups and communities to be able to express things that wouldn't be allowed in the physical world. I mean, I think a lot of, for example, this gay dating site that was supposed to be for heteronormative people in South Africa, but was actually then used for gay men so that they could meet underneath this like heteronormative avatar use, or like, for example, Legacy Russell's manifesto, the Glitch Manifesto, which speaks a lot about trans bodies being able to actually feel safe and be able to explore their gender through the use of the avatar. I think about Tiquin's notion of the cybernetic hypothesis about using opacity and panic tactics to basically be able to reorganize the Black Bloc without extreme surveillance from police states, and like all these ways that actually, like, maybe it doesn't necessarily, it's not the best mode of mechanism when it comes to like us talking about role play as is now, but maybe there's actually so many other ways in which avatars and bodies and gaming mechanics like actually allow people to celebrate themselves or feel freedom or agency that they potentially don't have in this consensual physical world that we are normally forced to live in.
It also kind of like reminded me of that, I mean, to critique power and to even be able to come up with like different ways, you kind of have to understand what you're dealing with. So in that sense, when power is shifting to technology and more of the systems we live in are technological, then we should also fully explore that space and understand it as good as we can to then like find free spaces again and maybe be able to change it. Which is like a very also, I mean, but the whole discussion was very like political. I think there's also just a reason to explore it, to just see the aesthetic effects, I think. I think that's also like a good reason to explore like all these network technologies.
Well, that's also the other point, right? That it gives you like the power, empower you in different perspectives, but also it is like and more in this time is really like surveillance, right? They are all the times like checking you. The power is just basically in three companies, like I mean, in three American companies depends all the web, right? And so in a way, and it apparently it's also really ecological when it's not, you know, when it's like a server that is all the time on in some place, right? And it stores data. So it has really also strong contradictions itself, the same technological spaces, you know, like I hear, by instance, here in Mexico that often like YouTube ban the people that is providing news against some part of the regime or whatever, you know, and I know that it happens elsewhere in some other places. So I mean, I feel quite skeptical to think that Twitter or any kind of social media, it's itself like a way to bring freedom to the people. You know, it's just providing the power to 2 or 3 people around the globe. And it's a really pity that there are not more platforms or more spaces that doesn't depend on 1 or 2 other companies. You know, you have basically the Chinese side, and then you have the American side, and then there is not much things. And I really would like to see something coming up soon, you know, especially from open source community and programs, you know, that they really take more advantage of what those kind of technologies means or could be, you know, because at the end, if we also leave this space to the companies, they will not really take care of us. They will not give us the chance, you know, like. So I think it's also time to organize, but much more in a global sense. You know, if we can go beyond our cultures and beyond language, you know, it's much more easy that we can decentralize also those kind of powers, and you know that we can make agreements also between people in different local places or physical spots. And from that perspective, I think there is certain kind of future, or at least the future that I want to see. Because otherwise, yeah, the other one is really dystopian.
That's yeah. Let's conspire. Let's create these spaces.
Yeah, let's conspire. Let's breathe together.